Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Bigger Picture. My name is Alexax Chase. I'm the investor liaison at Mentabicus. My job is simple: make sure Dan doesn't go chasing windmills, but build solutions that actually solve real problems. Today, I'll be reading Dan's bigger picture piece to you. Dan and I had an argument last week. He accused me of lacking vision, of not believing enough in disruption. Well, maybe. I'm the one who says, vision is fine, but spreadsheets are better, and nothing beats a solid profit. For me, producing profit isn't greed. It's proof. Proof that resources have been used wisely. Think of it as a salary from society. You did something useful, and people voluntarily gave you something in return. In a way, society paid you back, and profit is the premium for not wasting resources. Exchange without force, respecting people's individual choices, isn't that great? Anyway, Dan's the boss, which is why I'm the one up early this Sunday to bring you his latest bigger picture. It's titled, Square Not Hip, Unearthing Hidden Treasures in Vienna. A piece that wanders through Vienna's boulevards and cafés, contemplates on the Austrian School of Economics, and ends up with a new way of thinking about how we learn. When you walk through Vienna, you cannot escape the feeling that the city itself has been shaped by thought and vision. The Ringstrasse is not just an elegant boulevard. It is a framework that gave structure to a growing city, carefully planned and developed on the terrain of the old defense walls. The cafés are more than places for coffee and cakes. They were, and still are, spaces where people meet, read, debate, sketch ideas, write, listen. Café Central was a meeting place for Leon Trotsky, the architect Adolf Loos, the writer Peter Altenberg, and many others. Café Landmann was a favorite haunt of Sigmund Freud. Cafés like Museum Drew Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele, and other figures of Viennese modernism. And Café Greenstidel, once famous as the Parliament of Poets, brought together writers and critics at the heart of Vienna's cultural debates. These cafés weren't just background scenery, they were part of the intellectual infrastructure that allowed ideas to be shared, questioned, and refined. And in the same city, another current of thought emerged in the late 19th and early 20th century, the Austrian School of Economics. When I say school, I don't mean a building you could visit on a sightseeing tour. It's a way of thinking, a perspective that has since spread far beyond Vienna and Austria. What sets the school apart is not a rigid doctrine, but its method. It starts from the individual. Economics begins with people acting in time, under uncertainty, making choices, taking risks. From these choices arise prices, not imposed from above, but discovered in the market as the outcome of countless personal preferences. Think of it this way. The first cup of coffee in the morning might feel priceless, but the third or fourth, each one means a little less. That's the principle of diminishing marginal utility. Ludwig von Mises sharpened this insight. He saw the economy not as a machine to be engineered, but as the result of countless individual decisions guided by subjective values. The starting point, in his view, is always that everything derives from human action. People act purposefully to satisfy their wants. Through exchange and prices, their diverse knowledge and preferences are coordinated without central direction. The crucial insight is that economic calculation is only possible through market prices formed in free exchange. Without them, rational allocation of resources is impossible. These thoughts are deceptively simple, but they carry enormous consequences. If all material output starts as an idea and only becomes real when someone takes action, invents, invests, builds, then the question is not abstract. It is direct. What rules, what frameworks, what incentives allow more people to turn their ideas into reality? Without diving into the finer distinctions between different schools and approaches, I'm drawn to the simple logic of viewing economic activity through the lens of human action, with individuals and the entrepreneur at its center. The starting question is, do our rules, our systems, our property rights, our taxes, our institutions encourage people to create, invest, and build? Or do they stifle them? Does the financial system and do our currencies breathe trust? Throughout history, people have used shells, gold, printed paper, and even digits on a screen as money. Yet whatever the method, it must rest on one condition: it has to carry trust. As I sit at a desk to write these lines, I am reminded that the desk exists only once, whatever price tag we attach to it in whatever currency happens to be in use. Shells, printed paper, digital units, these may change. What remains constant is that, for human beings, it is ultimately the tangible output of goods and services that matters. Finance should reflect that reality, a means of orientation for balanced decisions, not an end in itself. Human beings, however, have always had more desires than means. Merely multiplying the digits of the currency cannot bridge that gap. On the contrary, it introduces a new problem, the slow erosion of trust. Seen this way, the Austrian school's perspective feels like a solid starting point, something grounded and down to earth. To me, as a non-expert, it suggests a reliable foundation for building economic systems from the bottom up, systems that remain tethered to reality. For in the end, we cannot escape the truth. From nothing comes nothing. If we want more than what nature alone provides, if we want desks on which to write essays and exchange ideas, someone must first make them. Every output is preceded by human action, and every action by thought. And here lies the deeper point. This anonymous coordination across distance carried by prices that signal scarcity rests on the recognition that no single human being, no committee, no institution, regardless of good intentions or formal qualifications, can ultimately manage such complexity from the top down. Without this spontaneous order of free-floating prices, without the countless independent actors adjusting to one another, there would be no desks at reasonable costs and no reliable framework within which ideas can be turned into reality. This down-to-earth approach, rooted in reality, is reflected in how I see the field of learning, especially when it comes to preparing for exams. The question is similar. How do we make sure that people can understand and recall the knowledge they need with an acceptable level of investment? What is the shortest and most efficient way to learn factual knowledge, particularly when the level of complexity increases and information is presented in structured forms such as diagrams? Many students who could eventually evolve into great minds are lost along the way because they never master the techniques that could turn their potential into something real. In school settings, this can mean missing the boat. Later in life, they may realize that with better tools and techniques they could have gotten on board. By then, opportunities have passed. It is tragic on a personal level, a story of closed doors and missed chances. But it is also a loss for society as a whole. The intellectual capacity that could have been developed remains unused, and the productivity that could have flowed from it never materializes. And downstream, in one way or another, the absence makes itself felt, even in seemingly unrelated fields like culture, social services, and the arts. Years ago, I said in an interview on my book Red Rubber Duck's Learning and Study Skill Guide, quote, "The book provides first-hand information on how learners can be more successful in their studies. I find this very important because, in this life, access to future challenges is often limited by judgments on past achievements with past challenges. Succeeding in studies is not a purpose in itself. It's about opening doors and having options to choose from in life." Unquote. This quote from 2010 remains true today. Using resources well is good for the individual, but also good and necessary for society. When a person develops their intellectual capacity to its full potential, they become more productive in every area of life, not only business. Say, if you master math and accounting, that skill will serve you even if you open a bar in Hawaii. And if you're aiming to become an astronaut, all the better, because those skills carry everywhere. In the end, it's not just the individual who benefits, society as a whole is lifted. And this is where Ment Abacus comes in. Not as a magic upload, not as some clever trick to turn students into learning machines. No, it's more down to earth than that, and at the same time more human. It's a scaffold, a framework, a structure. Like the Ringstrasse in Vienna, not the city itself, but a way of moving through it. Like musical scales, not the music, but the framework that makes music possible. Some might dismiss tools like this as just training students into obedient monkeys, as if helping them remember diagrams more easily is nothing but a trick to make them useful cogs in the machine, until the next wave of technology replaces them. Many years ago, Allen Ginsberg gave voice to the fear of an unbound, technological dehumanizing of society in Howl, raging against Moloch, whose mind is pure machinery, Moloch, whose blood is running money. Perhaps he had a point. Yes, I concede that the solution may sometimes require more hip, not square. But that is another story. My intention is different. My vision goes beyond producing better grades or saving time on exam prep. I want to contribute to giving education and learning the place back it deserves. A place where even those who don't naturally thrive on abstract verbal thinking can join in, can build, can recall, can create. Ment Abacus is about unearthing a treasure that lies hidden in the way we learn and making it available. An abacus for ideas, human action turns them into reality. Square enough to build on. And in a way, Ment Abacus is both hip and square, a kind of dream catcher for the mind, taming the stream of consciousness into something you can hold, recall, and build upon, hip enough to inspire, square enough to last. And this was today's piece. You can tell how inspiring Dan and Esther's visit to Vienna last month has been. It's as if visiting cities is not only about seeing buildings, bridges, and boulevards, but about visiting ideas. About walking through the places where the foundations of today's reality were laid. There was nowhere to go but everywhere, so just keep on rolling under the stars. Adding some hip to life? Maybe that even improves the bottom line on my spreadsheets. And despite it all, don't forget what Dan always says. Learning isn't a trend. Structure still works. Square, not hip. Visit us at mentabacus.com.
Every story needs structure. Every mind needs a map. Meant abacus. Square, not hip.
But add some hip every now and then.